except the curtain that rises to the stage. Silly games of second guessing. I just forget the lessons that I couldn't learn, because one street over there's a life I could have known that would have kept me from the one I had today. Except the curtain that rises to the stage. Silly games of second guessing. I just forget the lessons that I couldn't learn, because one street over there's a life I could have known that would have kept me from the one I had today.
Good morning, Robertson County. Oh, it's a kind of rainy Friday morning out there. Good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. This is 1100 WSGI. You from Vernon. This is one street over, and yes, it is. I got my green on. Fortunately, I'm a teacher over at Greenbrier High School, home of the Bobcats, and our colors are green. So that's one of our colors, at least. So very, very fortunate that I have green to wear today without any problem. That's something I always forget to do. And, I've got an Irish background, but I mean, don't we all? Don't we all? It seems like on St. Patrick's Day. It's so funny. But we truly do. We do have some connections to an Irish heritage, but we're like a lot of people here in America. My family, I'm a Wilson, my maiden name. So, and we believe it was changed a little bit over the years and adapted. My name Vivio now is completely made up. My husband's family, the name originator is from Bohemia, and it's a long story, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but we all kind of seem to have some ties to Ireland on St. Patrick's Day. So I got to thinking, I really, truly wish it had occurred to me to call Jack over at Jack Martin from the Greenridge Church of Christ, because he is from Northern Ireland, which is where St. Patrick is believed to have planted his first church. So it would have been logical for me to have called him. But I was thinking that we had Rachel Culver coming in this morning, and I was thinking she has her son getting married this weekend. I thought it was last weekend. So I had all that upside down in my head. Found out yesterday, too late to really schedule anybody else, that she was out. And so when that happens, I always have some things on my mind, and I've always been fascinated by St. Patrick. And so I thought, I think I'm going to let's talk about the history of St. Patrick. And I actually, I had a book that I left in the car. I wish I'd brought it in, but it's a historical novel, St. Patrick. And it is just look up historical novel on St. Patrick, and you'll find a couple of really good ones. It got me on fire for reading historical novels and things like that, which, if you're not a person that enjoys history, I will just say that historical novels can really put you on fire for it, because just like The Chosen has done for a lot of us in the faith, historical novelizations can give you an insight into history that understanding, instead of just the cold hard facts of history, it gives you a supposing about what was life like for these people. And that's what we have, of course, with Chosen. And so that, has really helped me in my reading through scripture and doing those kinds of things. But the historical novels, like the one on St. Patrick, and ones that I've read, I have a series that I read from the Taneys, Bodie and Brock Taney. I cannot say enough about them. They are absolutely my favorite they're my favorite authors, hands down. But they have a novelization very similar to The Chosen called the 80 Chronicles. But before I ever discovered that from them, I found some books on World War II and the Jewish people, and man, it is awesome. It is fascinating because it really walks through how the Jewish people came back to Israel and Israel becoming a nation, and just the amazing miracle of God that all of that is. So, cannot say enough about the Taneys, and if you look them up, it's spelled Thone. I think it looks like Thone, but it's pronounced Taney. They are outstanding when it comes to historical novelization, so recommend them highly. But get into a good historical novel, and it will put you on fire for history. And you might even learn something about St. Patrick and why we celebrate him on this day. So here's the deal. If you start searching out information on St. Patrick, there is a wealth of videos and things like that. There's also a piece from, I'm a very big fan of Drive Through History, David Stout, and he has a little piece on St. Patrick. And he has St. Patrick, his dating of St. Patrick, he has him being born in 390. And then another history I found has him being born 420 and living 420 to 490. So we're talking late 4th century, early 5th century is the time period when most people agree that St. Patrick lived. Now, the thing is about him, there's no real authentication for that. St. Patrick had two things that he wrote and he left that are attributed to him. One is called his epistle, where he is chastising a commander of an army who went in and slaughtered some converts, that some people, when he returned to Ireland, he was in Ireland 2 different times, but when he returned to Ireland, he wrote that epistle saying that, condemning them and excommunicating them because they had gone in and killed a group of people that he had just converted to Christianity. So that's one of the things he wrote. And then he also wrote what they call the St. Patrick Confession. And so that's where we get authentic information about St. Patrick. But a lot of what was written about St. Patrick wasn't written until about the 7th century, and some of it even 1,000 years after he lived. So it's very speculative, but David Stout on Drive Through History, he seems real certain about some things that some other things I looked at didn't seem so certain about. So again, it's one of those things you can certainly go down a rabbit hole today and learn a lot about St. Patrick. But I'll tell you the one thing that I have learned again and again from folks that are of true Irish heritage is St. Patrick's Day is not some big old party. And we're not going to talk about how the St. Patrick's Days became that. I didn't get too deep into that. I want to talk about St. Patrick himself. But there was an account I saw from a couple of tourists several years ago, and they had gone to Ireland and they were there on St. Patrick's Day, and they went to somebody and they were asking about, hey, when are the clubs opening up to celebrate St. Patrick's Day? And they got berated big time. I mean, by an old man who was like up in their face, finger pointing in their chest, go, how dare you? This is a holy day. And so, I'm sure because of the tourism, you will find a lot of brouhaha going on in some parts of Ireland, but there's a lot of people who revere it in Ireland very reverently as a spiritual time, and nothing like what we make it here in the States. So with all that said, so who was St. Patrick? A lot of people want to call St. Patrick, they think about him being Irish, but he was British. I think most of us realize that by now. But he was, and this is at a time, what I find, I just love history because I find it so fascinating that if you don't really think about the time period and when St. Patrick lived, it was right at the end, the last 100 years of the Roman Empire. So he was from Britain, which was under Roman rule, right? His dad was said to be a deacon, so it was still fairly early in Christianity, just a few hundred years, and so his dad was a deacon and was a church leader, and they show in his history that there were several generations of Christianity for St. Patrick, but he was taken captive. So he's in Britain. This is Roman ruled Britain. Around the time he was, again, speculatively, he was born either around 390, 420, sometime in that period, late 4th century, early 5th century. So that's the time period when he was born. He was around 15 or 16 taken prisoner by Irish pirates because Ireland was barbaric. it was considered a place that Rome didn't even want to fool with. And they were just, complete barbarians. They did not even want to bother with them. And so Rome never tried to conquer Ireland, is what I have found as I have studied this. So he gets taken captive, and some reports have that several thousand were taken captive at that time from his village, taken over to Ireland, and sold as slaves. And again, very barbaric time. He was sold to a Druid leader and was made a shepherd. So he's about 16 years old, taken away from his homeland into Ireland, very lonely existence as a shepherd in the northern part of Ireland, it is believed. And he has had a Christian upbringing, but apparently had not been completely and solidly a person of faith at that time. So he says in his confession. So again, there's two things that were written by Saint Patrick that are attributed to him. One is called the Epistle, which is where he's yelling at the commander about his army coming in and killing these people. But then the other one, called the Confession, is where he kind of tells his story, but he doesn't date any of this stuff. So that's why they're not 100% sure of the date he was born, the date he died, and all of that. But he writes about his time as a shepherd, and he says that during that time period, he was so lonely that he started to seek God again, and he would pray. In his writings, he says, he would just pray and pray and pray for, sometimes 100 times a day, just seeking God and really wanting God to speak to him. And finally, that around about 6 years into his captivity, he heard a voice, had a dream. I forget if it was a dream or a voice or a vision, but he attributes this to God speaking to him and saying, "You're being faithful, and I'm going to reward you," because in his confession, he attributes that time as a shepherd for being, even though it was, a really tough time for him, it was the time when his faith was renewed. It was in those struggles, that's where we find our faith a lot of time. So it was during that time period that he found his faith again. So he hears the voice of God, he says, about 6 years into his captivity, and he wants to return home. He's very homesick. And they say that he was told in this vision that there is going to be a ship that has been sent for you, and it's time for you to go home, but the ship is 200 miles away in this vision. So he decides to take a risk, and he heads out, and he goes 200 miles to the coast of Ireland, to the northern coast, and he ends up, I'm not sure if it's the northern coast, but he goes 200 miles away from where he has been captured, and sure enough, there is a ship there. So he goes and inquires to see if they will take him home, but at first they refuse because they're pagan and he's obviously Christian at this point, and they say that no way, we're not going to take you on board. And so as he's turned away, he says that he prays for help. He's like, "God, help me! Hey, here's the ship, and they won't take me." And as he's walking away, this is all in his writings called the Confession of St. Patrick. He says they yell for him to come on, and they reconsider, and they take him on board. Well, the ship journey is not that long. It's about 3 days. And after they land, they have a 28-foot path they have 28 days on foot before they're going to get to any place of civilization from where they land. And he says that all those that are with him, they set out on this pretty treacherous, foot journey for 28 days after 3 days on the ship. And about halfway in, they're starving, and they're in a desert area. He describes it in his confession as a rather, desert, desolate area, and they're starving. And so he prays, and the pagans, the ones that his shipmates, they say, "Okay, you're a Christian. Why don't you pray for us and see if you can't get us some help?" And so he does, in fact, pray for them. And just a short time later, they have a herd of wild pigs, a herd of swine, it says in his confession, that come out, and they're able to slaughter them, and they live on that. And just as their food, and because of that incident, that miracle, if you would, the pagans that he had been traveling with become Christian. And so just as they're about to run out of food, they do find civilization. And it's so interesting that as they rediscover civilization, he writes in his confession that he is again taken prisoner. So you have to wonder when you see these little things in a narrative written by the person themselves, you think, man, I would have loved to have had some details of that, because you kind of wonder if the people who he sailed in with and then who he prayed the food in for turned on him and took him prisoner, and he somehow convinced them that no, you need to let me go, because he says that on that second time of being taken captive, upon returning to Britain, and again, this is all still under Roman rule at the time, remember, he says he prayed, but he had a message from God saying, it's okay, it's only going to be for 60 days that you're going to be prisoner. And sure enough, 60 days after he prayed, he was freed again. And he makes his way home, and he is finally reunited with his parents. So you figure he's probably in his early 20s by this time, and he's reunited with his family, and he wants to become a deacon. He goes to a monastery, becomes a monk actually for about 20 years. And it's at that time he starts getting that pull on his life for a return to Ireland, because if you read the novelization Patrick, on St. Patrick that I was mentioning, it tells you of some fondness he had for the people of Ireland. And I haven't read his confession completely, but I am going to get it and read it. He must, talk about those relationships and things that he had as a shepherd, and that pull for him to come back to Ireland. Because after being a monk for about 20 years over in, again, Roman-ruled Britain, he decides he needs to return to Ireland. Well, his parents just beg him not to go, because Ireland's barbaric. I mean, it is absolute barbarianism. They had kings and things like that, and tribal kings, but it's a barbaric land. They figure if he returns to Ireland, he's going to be slaughtered. He's not going to be well received, but the call of God on his life said that I've got to go back. So he heads back, and while he is there, it's very interesting. Back in Britain, there is a charge in the church brought against him, and he is found guilty of something he did back before he was in prison the first time, like when he was 15 before the first invasion. And its history is recorded that the church found him guilty of something, and there's not a lot of details, but a friend defended him, but he writes about it in his confession, saying the whole reason he wrote the St. Patrick Confession is to state in his defense, I didn't come back to Ireland for some kind of profit of my own. He was accused of only going back to Ireland because he was trying to advance some agenda of his own, not the one of Christ. So when he gets back to Ireland, he finds that, again, it is very barbaric, and he has to deal with a lot of real difficulty. His first church, they say, was planted in a barn in Northern Ireland. He goes on to be attributed with planting 300 churches over his lifetime, 300 Christian churches, and also about baptizing 120,000 people. So that's the legacy of who St. Patrick was. But now, you look at some of the things that are said about him. He's attributed with casting the snakes out of Ireland, right? One of the history sources that I looked at says that, okay, that's nothing to do with him, because the people who wrote that actually wrote that, I'm thinking, in about 7th century. It was in the 600s that it was written about St. Patrick, that he had expelled the snakes out of Ireland. So there's absolutely nothing in St. Patrick's writing that attribute that to him. There is one account that's from a contemporary of his that does talk a little bit about that, but that is something that is very, very speculative. One of the history sources I looked at says that there are stories of the saints that were written several hundred years after a lot of the saints, and oftentimes they take a lot of liberty in painting the life of the saint as they wanted to, is what they say in it. So the records of him, sending the snakes out of Ireland, definitely a couple of 100 years, 200-300 years after he lived, and not written by him at all, but somebody who supposedly knew a lot about St. Patrick. Now, there's also a legend that goes along with St. Patrick that says that he used the shamrock to talk about the Holy Trinity, because there are the 3 leaves on those, right? And that is really nothing that is authentically attributed to St. Patrick, because that actually didn't come into play until about 1727. So about 1727 before that actually came into play. So it is very fascinating when you understand history, how much more it just really helps you understand the full story. And St. Patrick's one that, again, I always, as a kid, I actually have a little book that I wrote called The Leprechaun Trap. I have a children's series that is called The Po-Billy Boys. You can find it on Amazon. I apologize. It's not greatly published digitally, because it's something I did many years ago and I need to go in and redo it, I think. But it's there and you can get it and you can read it, and there's some cool little illustrations in it. But it's a kid's book. And we talk about St. Patrick's Day and the leprechauns and all the things that we make it. But the truth of who St. Patrick is, he was an amazing Christian leader of the early church in the right at the time, the final days of the Roman Empire. And when you really look at it from that perspective, man, it just really makes you go, wow, okay. Because at that time, they were still, you figure, at the time of St. Patrick, if he was in fact born in 390, as the drive-through history piece says, as David Stout is saying, if he was born in 390, you figure the Roman Colosseum, where all the gladiatorial battles happened, the last recorded gladiatorial battle was in 404 BC. And that was when Telemachus, he was a monk that had heard about the barbaric practice of the gladiators fighting to the death, right? And so he goes to the Roman Colosseum. He just can't believe that people are so barbaric and that's what they're doing. And so he goes to the Roman Colosseum to see for himself if that's what's happening. And the story, and this is authentic, archived stories in antiquity that we know happened, guys. I get so interested with people who think we can't know a lot about our history, because we've got a lot of records that, because of our archaeological finds, we know this happened. So we know the story of Telemachus is true. He was a monk, and he, again, was just heartsick over what was going on with what he heard at the gladiatorial battle. So he goes to Rome. And he goes to the Colosseum, and sure enough, there's a gladiatorial battle going on. They're down there fighting to the death. And he jumps into the arena and puts himself in between the 2 gladiators. And there's different things about what is said about him. And I got this from Professor Christy McClellan from Williamson College, and the writer of Gospel on the Ground and Jesus and Women and so many other things. But she's amazing. But this is where I learned this. Thank you, Professor. But she talks about how that he jumps in between the gladiators. And he says, in the name of Jesus Christ, stop this thing. In the name of Jesus Christ, stop this thing. And he says it over and over. And there's 2 accounts that say that the crowd killed him because they were angry that he was interrupting the games. But another more reliable account says that no, one of the gladiators just killed him, just, took his sword out and just killed him as he was standing there. And as the people saw the monk lying dead, there was a hush that came over the arena. And slowly, it just began to empty out. It was almost as if they finally saw the barbarianism of what they were doing and what they were calling entertainment. And the arena emptied. And that was the last record of any gladiatorial battle that happened, was Telemachus going in and saying, stop this thing in the name of Jesus Christ. And so it's just amazing that at that time, that was 404. This is at the same time St. Patrick is doing what he's doing in Ireland. So this is just amazing. And go and get the study. I haven't gone through the study that is titled Gospel on the Ground that's out right now from Lifeway with Christy McClellan. I did go through the Italy study, that is subtitled Gospel on the Ground, and it talks about a lot of this stuff. And it talks about what was going on with the early church. What were they facing? You figure in the 300s and 400s, I mean, that's not that long after Jesus was on the earth. I mean, we hear the story of some of the early saints. Polycarp. Polycarp is a fascinating study as well. He was thought to be, he is said historically to be a actual disciple of the Apostle John, and writes about encounters with John and how he talks about his experiences with Jesus. And these things we can know, guys. I mean, these are eyewitness people that understood that Jesus came and walked among us. And I get so fascinated by people who want to discount all this as just some piece of fiction that somebody wrote. And when you really understand the collection of books that make up what we call the Bible, it's fascinating, the number of different writers, the number of different places, the number of different times in which it was written, and it all has one thing, and that is the life and the death, the birth, the life, and the death of Jesus Christ, and the extraordinary plan that God had from the very beginning, that he wanted a people in his image with the free will to accept him or not accept him. And from the very moment that he said, oh, let's create man in our image, Jesus was there. He knew at that moment that it was what it was going to take for us to have a pathway back in that moment. And you may have heard me say this before, but I think about the time on the cross where he said, it is finished, not as Christ saying the earthly ministry is finished, but the plan is finished. The restoration of who we are in Jesus Christ and who we are to God as sons and daughters of the King. That pathway home of what he intended for us to be when he created us and gave us Eden. That fall from grace and that pathway home, that's what he finished on the cross. Not that earthly ministry, but the whole thing that he saw unfold from the moment it's like, hey, let's create man in our image. Let's create mankind. We oftentimes say man, but he said, let's create mankind, and male and female. He created them both created to be in rule, not one subject to the other, but that's a subject for another time, right? Anticipating Gwen Harder coming on in here and joining us in just a moment. But that is my understanding of the history of St. Patrick, and as to how we got to all the craziness that we have here that we call St. Patrick's Day and all the celebrations. I'll look into that another time. But I think the man himself was a fascinating study. Cannot say enough about finding a historical novelization. I apologize, my book again is in the car that talks about that. Maybe I'll send Gwen out to get it so I can show it to you and make sure I have the author right. But I do want to say that we wish the best to our sweet friend Rachel Culver, as they are having a wedding this weekend. I'm not sure if it's today or tomorrow or Sunday, but it's this weekend. Her son is getting married, and they're an interesting family because they got 4 kids. They got 2 older kids, 2 younger kids, and so they're just a fun family. I have a family that I got to know down in Texas when I was at the Blaze the same way. Their kids are spread out, and it's a very interesting, fun dynamic when you have adult children and you still have adolescent children at home, and so it's just kind of fun to watch. and she's a grandma and got I think her son's 10, maybe even younger, her youngest, but now she has her second one getting ready to get married. So just a lot of fun. We wish the Culvers all the best on wedding weekend, and today is the 17th, so we are in our Bible scriptures for today. We're in Joshua 22 through 24, Joshua 22 through 24, and Psalm 69. And I've mentioned this a little bit about how that I am reading along. Come on in, Gwen. I'm reading along in the Bible with Rachel. And I stay behind a lot. But what I do to catch myself up is I have Bible Gateway, and I turn it on, and they have a dramatized version of the Bible, which I absolutely adore. And I will just start running it, and And I was looking for that. Thank you. I just start running it and able to read along and listen to it. And what'll happen is I'm getting ready or something, and I think, okay, I didn't catch all that. I'll re-listen to it. So I'm really actually getting it even more inside me, I think, by listening to it audibly, and it helps keep me caught up. And I'm determined to get through this. And I love the days when I can sit down and turn the pages and mark in my Bible and all of those things. But most days I have to listen to it audibly. And I encourage you, even if you haven't started yet, pick it up and just this weekend, turn it on, listen to it, dramatized. You'll just love it. And it's wonderful.
By the hearing of the Word of God.
Yes. And so many of us, we learn so differently. People will give me books. And they're like, oh, you need to read this. And it's some kind of academic study type thing. I have struggled with that. I have to get it on tape. I can read and pour through novels. Oh,
I know.
Just so fast. I just drink them. But when it comes to something that's academic, I struggle because I'm very ADD. My students go, Miss Vivian, I'm ADD. And I'm like, oh, you're talking to the queen. Go sit down. Go sit down. And so...
if you get bored, you stray.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have a hard time when I'm reading something that is supposed to teach me, and I struggle with that with the Bible. Now, when I'm in the sections that are truly just wild, and there's a lot of it, I can pull into it. But when I get into Leviticus and Numbers and all of those things, and some of the
Chronicles and Kings,
this one beget that, all of the life,
the beginning of Matthew.
Yeah, that gets a little but
tedious.
that's very short.
Yeah.
And get your Audible Bible out and go through it with us. Reach out to Rachel, not this weekend. She's not going to respond. I'm just going to tell you. She's got her son getting married. Mother of the groom, just do as you're told. That's what I advise every mother of the groom. But she is out there, and she would love to add you to her email list. Great emails that just got so much great insight. She's so anointed. She's such a great teacher. And I just love her a lot, and she's teaching me a lot. She's one of my professors. I have all these people who I call my professors that are helping me get my doctorate in Bible, which I'll never have a paper to hang on the wall, but I'm determined to get the knowledge. I'm just pouring through it and just loving it. That's where God's got me right now. I got to do an ad. Will you take this and go out to my car and get the St. Patrick book? Because I want to tell... It's just sitting in the seat or in the floorboard in the front. But there's a book called St. Patrick, and I want to show people what it is. It's a novel. But as she runs out and gets that, I'm going to talk about my friends, Corbin Creek Greenhouse Gifts and Gardening Center. Go and talk to them this weekend. Go out there and spend some money. Pour some love out on Miss Amy, Miss Jane, and all the crew there. Just love them at Corbin. They got hit pretty hard with the storms that came through. Now, that does not mean that they're not ready to take care of you and serve you. They absolutely are. They were able to, they had two greenhouses basically just explode from the wind that came through. One of them had some structural issues, so they weren't able to restretch the plastic right away. So they're having to, and because of the cold temperatures that we're going to have off and on for the next week, they've got to keep things under cover. So just bear with them. If you come out looking for something, it may take her a minute to find it. They don't have everything spread out like they want to. When they love spreading it out and just leaving it out and just having it there. And they're getting to that point. They're going to have their Full Bloom Festival coming up on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, starting at 9. So you can come out for that, save the date for that. And then they've got their Customer Appreciation Day that is happening on May 13th at 9 a.m. Got free hot dogs, a planting station for the kiddos that's, for Mother's Day and all those things. So great stuff coming up. They're still putting everything back together after the storm, though. So go out there and love on them, spend some money. Go out there and spend some money and love on them. They're one of our full-time sponsors. They've got all their CBD products, fabulous stuff that will help you with any kind of an inflammation issue. And you need to stock up on your pain salve, your bug salve, your headache salve, the bug salve especially, because we're getting into that season where you're going to start getting those little bites and itches and things like that. And it is the best thing in the world for that. So go and talk to them today. They're still on winter hours for a little bit longer, 10 to 4, Monday through Saturday, 1 to 4 on Sunday. You can call them at 615-384-3185 if you have any questions, 615-384-3185, or just go by and see them, 4920 Highway 161, 4920 Highway 161 in Springfield. Let them know. When we're out, got my book. Thank you. And this is the book I was talking about. It's called Patrick, Son of Ireland by Stephen Lawhead. And again, it's a novel, fabulous. This is kind of what got me started reading his historical novels. I think you'll love it. If you want to learn a little something about St. Patrick, get that one. There's others out there, but I can highly recommend this one.
A great movie too that TBN has called I Am Patrick.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it has, let me pull up his name here. He's an actor that you would recognize from other things. John St. Reese, I think. He's got a hyphenated last name.
Yeah,
I'm not big
on actors. I don't know.
I think he was in Esther, the movie that they did. One Night with the King.
Okay.
And that's a really good movie about St. Patrick too.
I'll go check it out.
Yeah,
I'll go check it out because I love this kind of stuff, and that's what I love about St. Patrick's Day, and I just love all that. And anyway, so how are you?
I'm fine.
So what's going on?
I'm great. Well, today's St. Patrick's Day, 3:17, which is a great Bible verse, by the way. Go to John 3:17.
There you go.
Because everybody knows 3:16, but if you keep reading, now remember the Bible was not chapter and verse when it was written. So, we say John 3:16, and you go to John 3:16 and read that. But if you keep reading, like you would have normally done without the chapter and verse, 3:17, it gets even better. So it's he's here not to condemn the world, but to save the world.
There you go.
And I don't know whether I've told you my story about 3:16 and 3:17. March 16th and 17th. So 4 years ago, I was in Jerusalem. I saw the Jerusalem for the first time on 3:17, which is really, when you think about tying it in with the Bible verse, it's like, wow, that's really cool.
Right.
And I was on the Sea of Galilee on 3:16. So it's like, oh my gosh, this my first trip was like destined. But if you go back 4 years before that, I was in a hospital room with my dad. He and I had a very, very contentious relationship. And it's interesting because right now I'm finding that my walk is pulling me back to the Old Testament. And I go to a Torah-based church now. So we primarily study the 5 books of Moses, the what the Jewish would read every day. And you can go to a Torah study that they have on a daily basis. But the thing with my dad that really convicted me was the commandment, honor your parents. Now, it doesn't say love them. It doesn't say care for them. It doesn't say like them or get along with them. It says honor them. That's all it says. So the relationship with my parents, or with my dad especially, was not very good. So I was convicted, and it was like, basically, okay, Father's Day is coming up, so I sent him a card, and basically it was just, and it was begrudgingly. I mean, we, how often do we do things for God begrudgingly?
Like, okay,
fine,
I'll do it.
Yeah.
All right, Dad.
So I sent him the card, and it said, honor thy father and mother. Happy Father's Day. Like, here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to do this.
Yeah.
But what it blossomed into it was just incredible. And a lot of times you look at this hindsight, So we built our relationship back to the point that I was in the house that I grew up in, which I never thought I would see again. Once I left that on the terms with my dad, it was like, well, okay, fine, I'll never see that house again. But anyway, he was very, very sick. He had COPD and emphysema. He smoked all his life, and he was struggling with that. He was on oxygen 24/7. To the point that he had a tether around the house. He was just not without oxygen. So I got the call, and I think people are kind of hard. There are certain people that are not hardwired for it, but there are a lot of people are hardwired to say normal is normal. If you're in a crisis, that's why a lot of people in 9/11, went back to their desks with what was happening, because you default to normal.
Yeah.
I want everything to be normal. Well, I was at work and got the call that, he had been taken to the hospital. So it was like, okay, everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. But yet this little nagging voice inside my head said, no, you got to go. You got to go. Drop what you're doing. Go see Dad. So I'm thankful that I listened to it, because I didn't get there in time to speak with him. He had already slipped into a coma. But I did get there in time to walk into the hospital, and his room number was 316.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my gosh. So And the really interesting thing is we started out in 316. Well, there was a lot of family members that were coming in, and it was a 2-patient room. So it got crowded. And the nurse came in and said, we're going to see if we can move him to another room. Well, the room next door was 317.
Of course.
So he went from 316 to 317.
Yeah.
And so that's how God talks to me. He talks to me with numbers and music. Numbers and music are usually what get my attention. So yeah, 316 and 317 mean a lot to me.
That's awesome. What a cool story. And you have shared that with me before,
Yeah,
but I think it's worthy of sharing it again on 317.
17, yeah.
You know, and it's, was that the day he died?
He No.
No.
He passed in January.
Okay, because
he passed in January, but the room numbers were 316 and 317.
Okay. Well, and to kind of finish off the St. Patrick's story, the reason why St. Patrick's Day is on 317, it's believed that is the date of his death.
Yeah.
So, and that's one thing I don't think I mentioned, but it is fascinating. And if you don't dig into this history,
I know.
Oh my goodness,
there's so much you miss out on.
Christy and Professor McClellan.
Yes.
I'm going to say Professor McClellan, who is in Israel right now. She put up some posts this morning.
With the rains, I might add.
Yeah.
It's raining over there.
Yeah,
so I woke up this morning and went, oh, wow, we've got the same weather as Israel.
She put up a picture of Jordan this morning, and I was like, I would love to go with her. If God ever makes a way, I'll be there, Christy. I love Professor. She's brilliant. But so she says that she does this beautiful illustration. She makes this point. She says, the reason why you need to study the culture of when Christ was and the things around him. She says, do you ever have somebody in your life and you feel like you know them, but then you go home with them and you meet somebody in their family and you're like, oh, that thing you do with your mouth, your mom does that. Yeah. And you see that relationship and you see that connection.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, what a wonderful illustration, because it's in those familiar places that they grew up with that you understand them better. And so when you understand that and you really take some of the things that Christ said and you think, man, I don't get that. That doesn't make sense. One of the best ones is where he's talking about the mustard seed.
Right.
And so, I mean, how long did I think, one of these days I'm going to plant a mustard seed so I have a mustard seed tree? Because I'm not kidding.
And it's a bush.
I mean, it's
a weed.
It's a weed
that will take over.
And as Christy says, if you stand still, it will grow up your face.
Yes.
Because it's just so, and so she says, when Christ said, oh, it becomes the largest plant in the garden, he was using hyperbole. It was like saying, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse.
Right.
It's as if whenever you're speaking and you make a joke to draw people in. And the first time I heard her present that lesson, she read it and she goes, now all of you say, that's so funny. And I'm like,
What's so funny?
What's so funny? That's so funny, she says. And then she explains it. She goes, he's using hyperbole.
Right.
And he's being ridiculous to draw them in.
Right.
Because everybody in Israel knows mustard seed's not going to grow into the biggest plant in the garden. What are you talking about?
But compared from the seed to what it becomes.
And it's also talking about how that the church is going to be
like a mustard seed.
Like a mustard seed, and it's going to spread like a mustard seed. And when you turn it loose, and when you talk about how that the persecution, and she ties all this together, and I don't have my notes in front of me, and I'll slaughter it if I try to use the Greek word, but diaspora, I think, is the word, which means to scatter like seed.
Yep.
And the word that's used after the stoning of Stephen, and it says all but the apostles scattered, it's that diaspora. That word,
the Jewish nation was scattered.
Exactly.
You know.
But she's talking about that goes back to the illustration of the mustard seed. And that's why he said it will be like a mustard seed and it will be scattered.
Yep.
And it will be diaspora. I think that's the word. And that's the word that's used after the stoning of Stephen when it talks about how the church is scattered. And then as we talk about the story of St. Patrick,
right.
it was just within a few hundred years that spread was still happening during the Roman Empire. And I just, man, you got to know your history, guys, when you really study this stuff. It is fascinating.
And one of the first things religiously with Ireland is Irish Catholic.
Oh yeah,
I mean that's
and
that's
then
like
the big Protestant fight and
Yeah.
the troubles.
Yeah.
When we have Jack Martin in here, the reason Jack is here is because of the troubles, and that is the battle between the Catholics and the Protestants, and
who's right.
and who's right. Dear
Yeah.
God in heaven,
Yeah.
go read the Didache. Go read the Didache, and that is the teaching of the apostles. It's a document we believe that was found in some of the scrolls from Constantine's collection,
Yep.
that they believe was the writings of the apostles. That was kind of the condensed version of, okay,
this is how you do church. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
so many things, y'all,
I
on my
know.
mind right now.
I know.
We have just made such a mess of it. Oh, it's just not that hard. It's just not that hard.
What I listened to Alan Jackson out of Murfreesboro, and it's like he says, let's just boil it down: God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. That's it. That's it. And then it's this rebellious spirit of, well, what do I believe? Well, I don't care what you believe. What does the Bible say?
Yeah.
You may interpret it one way and it be totally out of character, off base, and go back to what the Bible says.
I'm going to kind of, in defense of the denominations and all, in all the different tribes right now, though, there is one place that's something that hit me just in my spirit very strongly the other day. I was listening to, I don't know what I was specifically listening to, but I think I was listening to a preacher, and it was talking about how that whenever it was talking about how that the Jewish people stayed Jewish. A lot of people don't realize, I think they forget, Jesus was Jewish.
Yes.
Jesus was Jewish. And the early church was Jewish. And then the Gentiles came in. And so they forget that dynamic. But, the apostles, they wrote, you stay what you were when you were called. If you're Jewish, you still, if you were circumcised, that's
Right.
fine. You don't
Yeah.
have to be circumcised to be, you stay where you were.
Right.
And so at the calling on my life right now, I've always been Church of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with the theology
All of it.
the Church of Christ anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But the Jesus part I do. So because my family is the Madison, and I've said this many times, because my family is the Madison Church of Christ, they are the people who circled around me so many times in my life. I've been there since 1989. I think I'm supposed to stay what I was when I was called,
yeah.
because the calling on my life is renewed every day.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Because that's my family, y'all.
Yeah.
My crazy cousins are up here at Epiphany, but and people like Gwen, and I want to come hang out with you guys on Saturday sometimes, because y'all worship on Saturday. I know
Saturday morning.
And it's just fascinating, all of it. I tell people, if I could
we do church, all day.
Yeah.
You come in and we've got a Torah class, and then we've got right now we're doing a Torah class that follows what the Jewish people are reading this week.
Yeah.
They've got a Mishnah that they follow every week.
Mishnah is just commentary. It's
Right.
a Jewish commentary when you hear Mishnah.
And so they follow that. It's kind of like the Catholic
In the Talmud.
yeah,
In the Talmud, another commentary, if I think.
I think so, yeah.
I think that's what.
But they do that, and we've got a beginning class right now, Torah 101, so that you're kind of introduced to what the Torah is. But then we have our service, and then we have our oneg, which is our meal afterwards. And to me, that's where the real church happens.
Yeah.
When you're sitting there one-on-one with somebody and you're talking about them and what's going on in their life and how can I help you and what can I do for you, and that's the real church.
Well, that's where we're to confess our sins to each other, so we can pray for each other, so we can be healed.
Exactly.
And that's the foundation of CR. But
so come on Saturday.
I would love to do that sometime.
Yeah.
Just trying to get all my stuff together.
All your ducks in a row.
It's like 10 till. I've still got 2 ads to do. Anyway, hi y'all. I hope y'all get something out of this. When we get off on these, I know when people, they probably were like, oh, Laverne doesn't have a guest for 30 minutes. What's going to happen?
Where's she going to go?
Where's she going to go? Well, and here's the thing. I sat and studied all this morning, show prep, kiddos at Greenbrier, show prep. And maybe we'll do St. Patrick in one of our shows that we talk about on, we're doing a history show called Who We Were. And I'm going to encourage them on St. Patrick's Day next year, as we approach St. Patrick's Day, let's do a show on St. Patrick.
Yeah.
And just see, because the historical, and we're not preaching to them, this just it's history. That's the thing people don't realize. I mean, when you really look at the real history, you cannot discount faith, because Christy has something, Professor McClellan has something that she says down at Williamson College. She tells her students all the time, there's not biblical history and world history. There's just history, and God's through all of it.
Yep.
And I love that quote.
Yep.
I love it.
And
But,
along with St. Patrick, study the Irish. I mean, just study the history of the Irish.
Yeah, it's
For such a
fascinating.
small little nation, they have had such an impact here in the United States. You know, them
We're all
coming over-
connected to them.
Oh yeah,
in some way.
the Irish.
But-
I mean, the Irish in the Civil War, and I mean, they
Oh
were,
yes.
they were a huge part of the building of this country.
Huge in law enforcement, in the early developments of the early colonies.
Fire
and,
stations.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, just huge. And
Public service. A lot of
better
public
believe
service.
it. Very big. And what's so fascinating to me as I was studying all this is they were considered too barbaric for Rome to bother with.
Yeah.
We ain't going there.
We're not
touching that. So I found that fascinating, and I think that's and you studied in the fall of Rome, and the Germanic tribe, Germany was what finally took out Rome. It's just fascinating.
Yep.
It's just really fascinating. I got to do an ad, y'all. Got to pause for a second. Let's talk about Cumberland Connect. I'm so excited that I have Cumberland Connect, because there's so many things that I need to do associated with what I'm doing with audio video production at Greenbrier, and I need to study. I was the lazy talent for all my career in broadcasting. I mean, I had great people that knew the technology, and they're like, push that button, Laverne. Just push the button. You don't have to understand why. Just push the button. Okay? So I have all this stuff I have to learn. So, and Adobe.
And they teach.
Yeah, and we have the entire Adobe suite. You need to come take this audio video class. Oh my goodness. We've got all the Adobe stuff, and it's so fun to work with. But I've got to study it and learn it. Well, until Cumberland Connect, I couldn't begin to do this stuff at home, and I've got to be able to, because I would have to just stay at the school so many hours. Or up here at the radio station or somewhere that had connectivity to do my work, to learn this stuff so I can teach the kids, the students. And so now that I have Cumberland Connect, I can do all that because I have a gig. And my children, I love their quote, "Mother, that's like filling your bathtub with a fire hose, having a gig. You don't need a gig, Mother." But I want one, and I've got one. And my son that says I don't need
$80 a month.
Yeah, my son that says I don't need a gig, I say, "Well, how much do you have?" Well, I have a gig. But I'm like, well, then me too. So get a gig for $80 from Cumberland Connect. And if you want to know, if you're a Cumberland Electric customer and you're like, are they even in my neighborhood yet? They may very well be. So just go to cumberlandconnect.org and put in your address, and they'll let you know if they're in your neighborhood. Or you can give them a call at 1-800-987-2362 and say, hey, when you get into my house? And they'll fill you in and tell you all the things. I know poor Kerry Roberts, our Senator Roberts, he's like, I'm one of the last one that's going to get it, because he's so close into town and he's not considered to need it as bad.
He has more options.
Exactly. So if you want to know more, go to, again, cumberlandconnect.org, cumberlandconnect.org. Find out all the things, and you're going to love it. If you're somebody that's saying, I can't even afford basic, well, there's a connectivity program, because this is a utility now, and they recognize that. But there's a connectivity program that provides the Affordable Connectivity Program. It provides qualifying households with monthly credit to help pay for internet service. If you're eligible, you could receive a credit of up to $30 per month toward broadband service. So go and talk to them today, and when you do, please let them know you turned Cincha. And I appreciate you joining us here on West Street over St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Go learn the story of St. Patrick's. Don't be born and acting silly tonight and getting stupid. Just go out
But
there.
you do have your green on.
Oh, I do. Because I'm Greenbrier Bobcat. I do not want to go in there and have a student come out and say, I'm going to pinch you. It's like,
Don't you dare.
don't you dare. So, and we've got midterms today, so we're gonna. A lot of the kids are leaving after the second block midterm, so they'll be out, and then I get to work and grade papers and do all the things teachers do.
Teachers too. Yeah.
And so it'll be great. But and I'm off next week.
Spring break.
And I'm working. My students, what are you doing, Miss Vivio? I am getting organized. I have got to get organized, because as a teacher, I've got to be more organized. Just got to be. And it's driving me mad. And so I think if I get my personal life more organized, and two, I'm getting ready to start my certification classes, and I'm going to be going to Murfreesboro a lot.
Oh, wow.
And starting in July. And so I've got to have a place to really study at home. And at my old studio is where my husband studied and got his master's when he was working with Electrolux. He got his master's.
It worked for him. It should be just fine for you.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so I'm not having to get a master's. Praise the Lord. There's a program for a career teacher. If you've been in the industry that you're teaching, then there's a expedited program, and it's much more affordable. It's like $1,500 instead of $20,000.
Wow.
You
a
need
shortcut.
You need to retire into teaching. We need you. Look into it.
Yeah.
You might be surprised at how quickly you can be teaching. They're even talking about, I might even be able to do some dual enrollment stuff later on. They're looking into that. I'm excited about that. That'll be wonderful because my degree is in broadcast. It is communications with an emphasis in broadcasting or media.
Yeah.
And so that qualifies me to teach as an adjunct.
And nowadays,
in some ways,
media is huge. It's so much more than just radio and television.
I talked to the students yesterday as we were preparing for the midterm. We've been doing a lot of hands-on camera work and things like that, and building studios and painting and doing. So we haven't done a lot of textbook work this last little bit, and so we had to do a lot of discussion and review about some of the things that are in the standards for audio video for this midterm. And I said, I want to make something really clear because one of the standards is talking about career opportunities. In audio video. I said, you do need to understand, just like if you were, Dr. Wilson is our theater teacher and music teacher at Greenbrier. And I think he would advise you if you came up to him and said, I'm going to be an actor. Good luck, dream big, go for it, but you got to make a living. So when somebody comes up to me and says, I want to be a TV news person, I want to be a talk show host, I want to be the voice person, the face, good luck. Dream big, but be ready to not make a lot of money. WTN's tried to hire me a couple of times since I came back from the Blaze.
Yeah.
Pitiful. What they've offered to pay me to come do traffic. I'm like, I don't need to be on the radio in Nashville that bad, y'all. I did my time.
Yeah.
I'm having fun doing just what I'm doing here.
But the thing, too, is, the
terrible pay.
The kids see the face.
Yeah. And they think, they're making so much money.
But they don't understand. There's a lot of people behind that face, too.
You better believe it. And that's more than likely the people who are getting paid some money. And that's what I told them. I said, if you want to get gifted at flying drones, that's very lucrative.
Camera people,
the people who do the editing.
It's far more advantageous to be because there are more of them than there are the faces on TV.
Yes,
and you go places more behind the scenes than you do in front of the camera.
And if you really want to be that person in front of the camera or behind the microphone, learn all the tech side,
right,
and get a job that can pay the bills. And honestly, there's a lot of people that want to do that. That's not super high paying on the front end, but you can get good enough that you can do really, really well. Mark Carver's my friend that does all the lighting. Such a gifted guy, and he was in lighting with one of the country networks, and when they closed, he went independent. He's
CMT?
done. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And he's done the Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is so good. And he's the guy who, when we work at the CMAs, it's because of Mark. I called him the other day and I said, hey, will you come over to the school and help me with lights and how to light this setting and all this that I've got? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So he's going to come out and help us.
Nice.
And then Barry Richards has a friend that does the colorization on stuff and a lot of the country music stuff. So Barry doesn't know this, but I'd really like to get his friend to come and talk to my kiddos about those technical sides. But that's one thing I told him. I said, that's the money is in it's in IT, y'all. So we got to learn all that. And I think I got off on this tangent with Cumberland Connect because I need to learn that tech side. So I've been sharing with them. Yeah, dream big. Be the next Dana Lash. I'm so proud of her. She's like kicking tail. I mean, she's awesome. If you don't know who Dana Lash is, you need to check her out. I mean, she is the single. When you look at the top talkers, she's the only girl up there in the top echelons, and she's got like 8 million listeners a day. And she's my friend. I love her. I'm so proud of her. I got to do another ad real quick. Talking about Barry and Rebecca Richards with the Exit Realty Garden Gate team, my friends in real estate. Save the date for the Kilgore Station Bluegrass Festival, the third weekend in May. We want you to come out and be a part of that. They will be there. They help sponsor it. They are from Cross Plains. They've been there for 27 years, I think he told me. They're Robertson County, and so they specialize in Robertson County properties. They buy and sell, but they buy and sell in the surrounding counties and across the state line in Kentucky. And if you want a marketer on your team when it comes to everything with real estate, I've talked a lot about Barry's marketing background. He's the expert. That's why I have him come help me at school. And he does all the drone footage and does great pictures. If your property is not getting looked at properly, it's probably because you need new pictures. You need to re-examine some of the things that you're presenting for your property. So go and do that if you want somebody that's just absolutely one of the best in the area to stay up to date on everything that's going on. Rebecca's been at this for over 15 years. She's one of the first in the area to be a seniors real estate specialist. They study and they know what they're doing, and they want to help you, whether you're buying or selling or you want to be a realtor yourself. They'll mentor you at the Exit Realty Garden Gate team. Connect with them today. You can give Rebecca a call, 615-504-7425, 615-504-7425, or you can visit them at sellwithbecky.com, sellwithbecky.com, or BUYRobertsonCounty.com. Always let them know U-Turn sent you. And thank you so much for joining us. Go one street over. You got any parting thoughts? Just go to church. Go to church. Go to church. Don't get out and get crazy for St. Patrick's Day. You can go hang out with friends if you want to. It's fine. I know Tommy's playing. Cricket icon. And so, enjoy St. Patrick's Day. But remember, you're a follower of Jesus Christ. Act right. Act right. I'm just telling you. And also, to find a church home, find a place to be in fellowship with, and have a wonderful week. I'm going to be off next week. Lee Marie is my understanding. And if Lee Marie can't come in here, I'll come in, but because I'm here in town. But Lee Marie is supposed to be filling in for me next week, so I hope you will join Lee Marie for she'll have to go for on Wednesday, but she'll be filling in for me on one street over, so we'll still be here next week. Join us. Thank you for joining us today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is 1100 WSGI. God bless. Have a great day.
When the day is over and those thoughts set in,